Welcome to the Unpacking Sunday podcast, where we take a deeper look at what God is speaking to you, to our church, and to the world around us. So grab a coffee, sit back, and let's unpack it together.
That was pretty good.
Thanks.
Yeah, good. Okay.
I snapped my finger and gave us a signal when I edited it. Mike.
We're here. Luke, you were not feeling well the last couple days, so welcome back.
Gosh. Well, you know what's ridiculous is that it was last week when I did the whole I'm not going to knock on wood, I haven't gotten sick yet thing. I said that.
Was that just last week?
This was last week's episode. And here I was bedridden for 2 days, and like I've had one kid sick because of it and another who's sick right now. And anyways, so lesson learned here. When you talk about not knocking on wood, the devil takes advantage. He jumps on
My kid has been sick too.
Oh,
as
shoot.
You know, or maybe you didn't know.
I didn't know.
No, Jackson, he's been having a good old time.
Okay.
Throwing up and stuff too.
This is a thing that's going around. So
I was just laughing because you know how when you're a parent, you have to stop caring about all that stuff.
Yeah.
Like the first day Jackson was sick, I just caught his vomit in my hands.
Yeah,
and it's like you don't even realize what you're doing when you're a parent.
Oh, yeah.
You lose all of that.
I have so many stories being a care aide.
Yeah, oh, I bet.
But I can't really tell them on the podcast. But if you ever want to sit down and have a coffee, I can tell you some stories. But
that would be so good.
Oh, my goodness, yes. No, it's so true. Just when you find yourself with different types of bodily fluids in your hand, and it's fine.
You just have to deal with it.
It's fine.
Yeah. Yeah. And thank God for soap and water.
Yeah, I do have a quick funny story though. When we were at my grandma's house, my mom's house, my kid's grandma, and one of our kids were younger. Anyways, it was like I don't know, the kids were like babies or small, and there was a floater in the pool.
So that's no good.
Yeah, like a little poop torpedo.
Yeah.
And my mom just like grabbed it with her hand. And like was gonna get out of the pool and like throw it or put it away. Anyways, and the quote was, it was like my Ivy is like, Grandma's always got poop in her hand.
Oh my god!
It was a
Grandma.
Thing. Grandma's always got poop in her hand. So we that lived to this day, lives on years later. We say that to her still. So it's funny.
To Grandma.
To Grandma. Grandma's always got poop in her hands.
Oh, Grandma.
Yeah.
Grandmas are amazing.
Yes, they are.
One day you're gonna be a grandpa.
I will. I look forward to it.
Yeah.
Just feed the kids candy, send them home.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, it's going to be great.
Those are the best.
Yeah, you know what? I'm at a point where like I can see it and I'm okay and I'm like excited about that era, that stage.
Okay, you're not like rushing it to happen.
Oh, no, not at all.
When it arrives,
but like,
you'll be okay.
Like even 5 years ago, that idea would have been like offensive or like this idea like grandpa. What are you kidding? Right? I'm still like in my prime, right? Then all of a sudden you cross that 45-year line and you're like, wait a second.
Are you past 45?
I'm
now?
46, dude.
Oh wow.
I know. That I said that to Violet yesterday. She's like, how? I said I just mentioned that I was 46 for some reason, and she's like, ew, Dad. What? Yeah. It's like it's real. Time goes by.
Good for you.
Yeah. But
time does go by, and it is flying by.
Yes.
So let's get into this week's message.
Yes, let's do it.
Romans 14, verse 5 to 9. Do you remember anything from Sunday? I know it was like a whirlwind because you've been sick since then.
And I'm coming into this very cold.
So you've had a lot of time to reflect on the message.
Like word for word, no, but I do, like, just lead me through a couple things and it'll all come back to me here. Just lead me, guide me, Pastor, guide me.
Okay, we were still on this idea of unity and not judging each other because we're different than each other. We talked about like different days. Some people might consider certain days sacred.
Talking about Christmas and birthdays and the controversial Halloween.
And to you, those days might just be ordinary.
Right.
And that's fine.
Right.
That's fine. Just be convinced in your own heart.
For sure.
But then I think that Paul raises the stakes a little bit when it comes to disputable matters when he reminds us at the end of this passage that, but also remember, everything that you do is not for yourself.
Right.
It has an impact on those around you, and ultimately, you live for Jesus now.
Sure. That's a bit of a mic drop moment.
Yeah, and it's like, oh, shucks. Yeah, you're right.
Everything you do.
Everything,
do it unto the Lord.
Whether you live or you die.
Whether you live or you die.
And so when we're talking about disputable matters like what we eat and drink, the days that we celebrate, all of this kind of stuff where I think some of us lean too far into liberalism and some of us probably have too strict of boundaries for certain things.
Mm-hmm.
But we have to remember whatever the choices we're making, it's actually for Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
And so we should be reflecting that in the choices that we make.
Mm.
And so that's, I think, a high calling.
I saw a quote recently, a C.S. Lewis quote that I loved, and it says, "I want all of hell to rejoice on the day I'm taken from the fight."
Wow.
Isn't that good?
I love that guy.
Isn't that good? And I was like, oh, that's how I want to live my life. That's, just with this idea of living and dying, like
Right.
all of hell to rejoice the day I'm taken from the fight.
Right.
That's a good quote.
That is very good.
Yeah.
Oh, I should get a tattoo of it.
Bro tats.
Well, we already were talking
Yeah, we
about
have
that
talked
once.
about that. So
and
maybe
now we're going to have an episode on tattoos because some people are mad that we just mentioned.
Oh, wow. We both have tattoos.
Yeah.
Yeah. So notably.
No, we notably have them.
Yeah.
Yes.
There you go.
And we have talked about that, though.
We have.
I don't think that will be what it is.
Okay.
A quote from C.S. Lewis, but
yeah.
Yeah. So what do you think about that? Okay, let's just talk about first a little bit the example that he gives us, and then this idea that we live for Jesus.
Right.
Really, are some days more sacred than others?
Like, no.
Oh, okay. But it says some people consider one day more sacred than another.
Yeah, but I think in reality, God has appointed us and given us the example to rest, like this idea of dedicate a day to him. So I think in that sense, there's a sacredness to that. But I feel like for the rest of our holidays or days that we have, when we get to the brass tacks of it, Christmas is the day
best day ever.
And we decide to celebrate Jesus' birth on this day.
Right.
But it isn't actually the day that Jesus was born on that we know of. Neither is Easter. Neither, or Thanksgiving is the day that, you have to be thankful for everything. It's like these are all man-made decisions to commemorate.
Right.
So I don't think by definition that makes those sacred days. Now,
okay. But we have made them sacred.
Yes.
So how do we navigate that? Or how have you navigated that in your own life? This has come up, I think, a year ago. We talked about this in a funny way on the podcast.
Right.
Because some staff members were very passionate about Valentine's Day.
Oh, yes.
Yes. And then there was us.
Yes.
And I think we even said, once you've been married a little longer, you'll calm down a little bit.
And still so offensive.
Yeah.
And my voice just cracked like a 12-year-old boy. But yeah, so my wife and I, we don't really celebrate Valentine's Day.
Right. It's the day of love, though.
And I get it. And I don't want to offend anybody by saying this because I've been married now 23 years this year.
Congratulations.
And thank you. And, I met the love of my life when I was young. And, we have an epic story and we feel like we're just getting started. Right. So there's that. But at the same point, to me, Valentine's Day feels like a day to recognize if you're single. In the sense where it's to mourn the fact that you're not in a relationship. You know what I mean? That's what it feels like. It feels like people who really celebrate Valentine's Day are the people who are like, I'm sad that I don't have that relationship in my life. It's a reminder for those people. And it's fueled by commercialism, by restaurants, by wine companies, by roses. Did
I ever tell you our first Valentine's Day?
No, please tell me.
Oh, I interrupted you, so I'll tell you after this.
It's okay.
You just reminded me.
But I don't want to make people mad in a sense because it's once you are married and you have your person, it's for me, I'm I do feel like I want to celebrate
Valentine's Day is every day.
Yeah, and that sounds so dumb, but it's what is the difference from February 14th to if that is the day that you are celebrating your person, you're doing it wrong. Right. You know what I mean? Your person needs to feel celebrated so they feel like a special day for being celebrated, which is ridiculous. You know what I mean? Although, that being said, I do think there's beautiful things about having ceremony and taking your wife out and making special occasions special, that kind of thing. But I don't want to seem unromantic, or I don't want to seem you know what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
Am I being heard? Do you think I'm being heard?
I think people hear what you're saying.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So maybe we shouldn't talk about Valentine's Day, but what about just these other days in general? How do we navigate? Somebody is going to celebrate a certain day that you don't agree with.
Mm-hmm.
So what do we do with that?
Well, Paul tells us, like, don't worry about it.
Don't
Right?
worry about it.
Yeah, don't worry about it. He's like, follow your conviction,
Mm-hmm.
how God is leading your heart, right?
Hmm.
In these situations. I think he's being very clear here. Don't make a big deal about this because the other person is on their own journey with their own history regarding holidays and whether it
Mm-hmm.
be like family history, even trauma, like these sorts of things. Like, I think you have to look at a person's individual journey and their convictions, and you have to be sensitive to it. And that's what Paul's really pointing at here. I think he's like saying, don't be mad about these things.
Yeah, and I appreciate actually that you said like we're not even all going to come from different religious backgrounds, but
Right.
all this our own journey and what's happened in our life. I have a dear friend who doesn't like Christmas because they had traumatic experiences when they were young at Christmas time,
Totally.
right? And so it has nothing to do with religion or commercialism or anything like this, but it is just something that I should be conscious of because I'm psychopathic about Christmas, right? But it's
Yeah.
like, because Paul will talk about that this week when we
Mhm.
get there, is we do have an obligation to not cause our brothers and sisters to stumble,
Right.
right? And actually, where we feel passionately about something, we should lay it down
Wow.
in order to make sure that they are okay,
Wow.
right?
He's really calling for an even keel approaching this, isn't it?
Yeah, like,
Don't be under aggressive and don't be over insane
like
about
maybe
it.
just
What is
get
that?
over yourself.
Yeah,
a little bit,
it really.
right?
Yeah, it's
And it's
like,
okay if you feel like that, but keep it to yourself when
Yeah.
it comes to these matters.
Right.
Let's not like over put this because there
For
are
sure.
things in scripture that we need to keep each other accountable to,
For sure.
but not like this kind of thing, like what you eat and drink and what day you celebrate and stuff like that.
Right.
So you said mic drop moment. That was the word that you used when we were talking about this passage. I'm going to read 7-9. Paul writes, "None of us lives for ourselves alone, and none of us dies for ourselves alone. If we live for the Lord, and if we die for the Lord. So whether we live or die, we belong to the Lord. For this very reason, Christ died and returned to life, so that he might be Lord of both the dead and the living." Shucks.
Well,
So do what you want, but also not really.
right.
But
Like-
also do what Jesus would want.
Right. Yeah, I think it's like that's one of those 30,000-foot views from, it's like where you're zoomed in. Don't be mad about, whether someone feels like they're able to celebrate Halloween or not.
Right.
And then there's this thing, whatever you do, it's in dedication to the Lord. So make sure you're doing it
Yeah.
for him or doing
Yeah.
it right, at least,
Right.
right? And that's a big thing. Like, I feel like you can't take that lightly because, you have people, sometimes it's hard to look at the spectrum of how people live their lives and think that there's people who are living with a really like semi-dedication to the Lord. I think that's hard for me to understand.
Right.
But there is people who literally aren't thinking about God and they're coming into church on Sunday. And they're like, oh right, like you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I know who God is, like and I'm not thinking of anybody in particular, but I'm just saying like there is people who have one foot in and out the door, and this is a reminder to those people: if you're not fully serving God, you're serving the opposite of God. Like this, it's like you're not living. If you're not living your life for Him, you're not living your life for Him, right? Like it's there's no living in the shadow here. It's like you're in or you're out kind of deal, and it's yeah. I think there's just a heavy thing there to realize.
So there is a wisdom in all of this then too about like the places that we put ourselves or the things that we expose ourselves to. Like Paul will say elsewhere in scripture, like although everything is permissible for us now, not everything is beneficial, right? And so I think that same principle applies here. Is like, sure, you have a great freedom, especially we know so much about the Jews and the rules and the regulations they would have been under, and suddenly they have incredible freedom where Paul writes to them like nothing is unclean for you anymore, right? But that doesn't mean that it's going to be beneficial for you to go and chase every single freedom that you have now. Right? And so you do what's right in your own conscience. And so I'm thinking in my own life, like boundaries that I've had to put up, not because that thing in itself was wrong, but it's like, this will not be beneficial for me if I head in this direction. Maybe there are certain people that have like, I should not hang out with because I live for Jesus, and they're not going to make that very easy.
Right.
Right. And so there's nothing wrong with hanging out with them. But for me, it's like, oh, I have to remember I have this certain call. Maybe I shouldn't hang out with those people, or maybe I shouldn't go to a certain place that maybe other people feel very comfortable.
Right.
But I'm just not going to go there.
Right.
Like, so how do we navigate that? Like, how can we develop wisdom or discipline in that area?
Yeah. I think like there's such a big part of this that's dependency on the Holy Spirit too. But I think deep down, everybody knows, right? Like we all know whether we, we're at a place where we're like, I probably shouldn't be here. It's like there's a knowledge there. There's
right.
There's a I probably shouldn't be watching this. I probably shouldn't be listening to this. Whether it's not even saying it's like you can instantly go to the extremes, but it's like even if it's like a Joe Rogan podcast and you feel like like you're like this is really worldly, and like I made a conscious decision a while ago to stop listening to like I used to barely listen to worship music. I just kind of had this thing where it's like it doesn't feed my soul. It feeds my spirit, but it doesn't feed my soul. You know what I mean? And I had to make a constant decision to listen to music that fed both, because it's like there's this thing where, and it was a bit of a journey to try and find artists that I found like this is feeling. I love the creativity. I love the artistry. But it's also, this is like God-centered and it's feeding my soul, and it's also feeding my spirit, as opposed to this. When something is just feeding your soul, something that just makes you feel angry or something like, just talking about, let's say if you only listen to Rage Against the Machine or whatever, like that kind of thing. That is something that feeds a part of you that isn't going to be beneficial to your relationship with God. And it becomes a detriment and actually begins to take away. I think it begins to steal from your soul in a sense. So it's like so I had to make this decision to try and find music that I really enjoyed, that was spiritual, that was pointing to Jesus, but also, searching for artists that were, it wasn't just like kind of like cotton candy Christian music or whatever, you know what I mean? So I know that's a bit of I've just been on a rabbit trail here, but at the same point, I feel like we have to make conscious decisions that if you are only watching HBO shows, it's like you're going to find yourself drained and longing for worldly things. You know what I mean? That's kind of what I'm talking about in a sense. Right. I think that's what Paul's pointing to here.
Yeah, there is. I used to always teach when I went to like kids camps this very simple lesson, like what you put into your life is what comes out of your life, right? Right. And that's what you're going to see. So we have to be conscious of the choices that we make of what we're putting in, especially with the comment that you made earlier of like, you're either living for Jesus or you're not. Right. Right. And so how does that reflect in what you watch? Is this pointing me to Jesus? Because I believe that too. You're always moving toward him or away from him. Right. You're not staying in one place. Right. We're not stagnant human beings. Right. You're either moving forward or you're moving backward. And we're all going to do this dance our whole lives. So like, what am I putting into my life? And is this pushing me forward or pulling me away? Right. Right. And I'm not saying always be doing a Bible study and like never relax or anything like that. But there's a way in which we live our lives that ought to point us toward Jesus.
For sure. Right. And I think there's even decisions that we can make that can accelerate that process. Sure. Right. So when you find yourself like, only wanting to watch dark things that, are stimulating dark places, it's like, then from there, it's like, that's going to accelerate that process of pushing you farther away from Jesus.
Yeah.
Right? So.
And we can be conscious of this even in good things in our life too. Like you mentioned briefly Sabbath. We can be conscious of that even in good things, which we could do a whole podcast on Sabbath another time. But like some people will take a Sabbath, but really all they're doing is like they're playing video games and eating junk food. And for them, they're just not working. Right. And it's like, but that's not the point of Sabbath, right? The point of Sabbath is reorienting our lives back onto the goodness of God. And the fact that because of Jesus, we get to rest,
Right.
because our trust is in the Lord.
Right.
Right. And so when you're Sabbathing, what are you even doing?
Right.
Because this is a gift to you, a good gift that God's given you. But are you actually using the good gift to put you, reorient your life in that direction?
Right.
Sometimes we don't.
Right. It just reminds me of this saying of like, giving Jesus your heart, right? That kind of iconic Christian saying that we talk about. And really, I think what that's pointing to, and what this is, even in what you're mentioning about Sabbath and everything, is what that is saying is God wants our intentions. He wants our intentionality to be about pursuit, about drawing nearer to him, that kind of, or even to the point on the opposite end of living opposed to sin. Living, holiness is this idea of living, trying to be opposed to sin, the best that we can. So, yeah, I think that really what it comes down to in this idea of these things is there an intentionality to our actions? There's an intentionality to our pursuit of Jesus, or to our avoidance of things that would accelerate that distance between us,
Right.
Yeah.
And then we concluded on Sunday with this idea that actually Jesus is able and deserves this kind of allegiance. Because he is now, he always was, but he has proven to be both the Lord of the dead and the living.
Right.
Right. And so we must answer to this person who has earned for themselves the position of Lord over everyone's life. We will answer to him one day for how we lived our lives.
Wow.
Because not only was he innately is God, so he already had that place, but then he earned for himself and was given that place by God too. So we must answer to him. And so this is an alarming reminder, to me at least, of I should be taking stock of things that I do in my life, and even the small things. It's true, we've said it every Sunday since we've been back in Romans. There are clear things in Scripture that we don't have to debate. That's just right and wrong. Of course, I'm taking stock of that in my life. Those are the obvious things. But even when it comes to small things, all these disputable matters, even how I'm going to spend my time today, who I'm going to spend it with, what I'm going to spend it doing, how I present myself to my coworkers when I get to the office, all of these kind of things, I'm going to have to give an account to all of that. Did I reflect the goodness of God?
Right.
Right? Because he is the Lord of my life. And this is the radical thing that I have been working through in this last season. And I probably say it to my wife every 2 days. She's probably sick of it. But it's God, Jesus is not only Lord of my life. He's Lord of the living and the dead. So the people who are still dead in their sin, he's Lord over them too. They just have not acknowledged his lordship yet.
Right.
And I have to live with a radical enough conviction that he's Lord of your life, whether you see it or not. Right? And so I need to live in that kind of way, that this is the reality that we live in. And he's earned this position for himself. So I think it gives us a reality check of the choices that we make.
That sheds light on that verse in, I think it's Matthew 7, where it talks about, I never knew you, right? And it's I think that it's if he's the Lord of the living and the dead, he's referring to the saved and unsaved, right? And so it's I think as a young man as a teenager, that the verse always really freaked me out, right? Because it was how do I know that God knows me? Kind of thing, right? But it's this idea of his lordship exists over all. And so that verse is really referring to this idea of the people who haven't acknowledged who Jesus is in their life, and are living their lives according to it. So it even says that the demons know who God is, right? But there's this intentionality thing again. Are we living our lives with intention to be nearer to Jesus, in pursuit of him, in pursuit of his ways, in pursuit of his word, in pursuit of worship? And if we aren't, if you can't confidently say you're living your life like that, you have to take a moment and say, God, how can I do this better? And reveal to me the ways in which I can do this better.
Because actually in Matthew 7, it says, many will call out to me, Lord, Lord, and I will respond, I didn't know you. Right? And that does relate to what we're talking about, because you could eat the right things and not eat the right things, and you could go to the right places and observe the right days.
For sure.
And you could say no, look at my life. I did all the right things. And he's going to say, but you didn't do it for me.
Right.
You
Right.
didn't.
Right.
You did it so that you could be right.
Right.
Right. But you have to recognize that everything you do is for me.
Right.
And only then will the promise is that if you're actually seeking him in your life, you're going to find him.
Yeah.
Right. And then you don't have to worry
right.
about what you're saying.
Yes.
Like, will I call out to him and he'll say,
yeah.
I never knew you? No, because you spent your whole life pursuing him.
Yes.
Right. But we are pursuing Jesus. We're not pursuing doing the right thing.
Right.
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 That's an outflow of our life of pursuing Christ.
Right.
Yeah, fascinating. Oh, well, I like that you brought that up. And sorry, we're going to cut it off here, though. But
it's all good.
We can come back next week.
We'll be here next week. And sorry for the late episode, guys. I was sick, but
Is this late?
Yeah, well, I would usually get it out on Tuesdays. So.
Okay.
But I'm going to throw it out as soon as I can here.
Okay.
But we love you, church, and we'll see you again next time. Unpacking Sunday is a podcast of Cariboo Road Christian Fellowship Church. If you're interested in more information, please check out our website at www.crcfchurch.com.